I'm sitting here on Zoom with Doyle Glass, who is the author of this memoir, Swift Sword, the true story of the Marines of Mike 3-5. Is that how you say?
That's correct, Carolyn, and it sure is an honor to be here with you.
Thank you. So I have some questions. I have lots of questions for you, Doyle. First of all, I think your book is very timely. I think we really need to look back at Vietnam and some of the things that were going on. And one of the things that really struck me about your story, the information in your book, is the malfunction of the M15 rifles.
That's true. The M16 was a new weapon, but we can't overlook how bad that was. It truly cost lives.
Talk about taking a knife to a gunfight.
That's right. Well, some of the Marines, when they talked about the rifles jamming in combat, because what would happen is that because of the defective ammunition and the way that the rifle was manufactured, rounds would get jammed in the barrel and another round would come up behind one. And the Marines talked about having to take their cleaning rod to shove down the barrel, much like a Revolutionary War soldier with a musket, taking a ramrod in. And this is, of course, a very scary and dangerous firefight. So,
Yeah. So I'm sure everyone wants to know how you came to write this book, because you actually didn't serve in the war. Is that correct?
I did not. I grew up during the Vietnam War. I was too
Yeah,
young
you
to
were too
serve.
young.
Right. But I, of course, saw Walter Cronkite on TV every night. And, I heard about the soldiers coming home and the less than friendly welcome that many received. In the 1990s, we honored our greatest generation, World War II, as we should have. We saw Saving Private Ryan, a Band of Brothers, and that was very timely and right. Well, in the Vietnam War, a lot of these men were the sons of those same veterans who fought in World War II.
Yeah.
So now in 2024, they're at that age where it's time to honor them as we honored our greatest generation, World War II. What I saw back in the early 2000s was a real gap in our historical record. We don't know a lot about combat in Vietnam from the viewpoint of the men that were there. And I just saw a gap in the historical record. I'm a history guy, I'm a writer, love history. And I said, okay, well, this is going to be my mission. And so I wrote Swift
A real
Sword.
legacy.
Thank you. A legacy, but the real legacy is the men that honored me by letting me tell their story and trusting me to tell their story. And this book, Swift Sword, and my other book, Lions of Medina, which is similar, those veterans, many who are not with us anymore, many of them have already passed on, trusted me with their story because, once they're gone, their stories go with them. So at least we
True.
have
So
this.
true. So for you personally, what was your biggest challenge in interviewing these soldiers, putting the whole story together, assembling the book, getting it published? What part of that process was the biggest challenge for you?
It was quite a challenge. I view it as putting together a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, three-dimensional, and not having the pieces to put it together, having to go out and find the pieces that fit, discard those that don't, and put together something that's not two-dimensional. It was quite the challenge. Uh, Once again, the veterans, each man told me his story on a different part of the battlefield, and through just basically the interviewing and comparing and uh, putting all of this together, I finally came to the story that we have today. And once again, it's those men that said, "No, you got that wrong. This was the way it needed to be. This is what happened." It's their story, and they helped me do that.
There must have been some pretty emotional moments for you in writing this.
It was very emotional. I was going through a lot in my own life, but the struggles that I had in my own life, these men gave me inspiration because if they could get through what they had to get through, then I certainly could take care of the struggles, my own personal struggles. So they were quite the inspiration to me in writing it because of the challenges that they overcame. And you're right, it was quite emotional. You know, even to this day, going back and reading it's a tough book to read, but a very
It is
timely.
a tough book to read, and I really came away with a powerful, for me, new understanding of what Vietnam vets really experienced because I've heard of post-traumatic stress syndrome, and I remember the 60s, and I know those guys faced some really terrible moments when they came home being called baby killers and everything. And I have a friend who lost a husband there and another one who divorced a Vietnam vet for those very post-traumatic stress syndrome episodes, which no one understood really at the time. And my God, after reading the moment with the bodies and the blood and the noise and the cacophony and the uncertainty, and I'm just amazed that anyone came out of that with any kind of sanity. That was
Exactly.
my biggest takeaway.
I 100% agree with you. I marvel at it every time I read it or look at it, and I've been immersed in the story for now many years. Our Vietnam veterans, in many ways, have faced many more challenges than our veterans from our other wars. They would go in what was called the individual replacement system, which would put a new guy in the middle of a veteran unit, isolated. That person was not made a friend to anyone because he would make mistakes to get veterans killed. Uh, you would have lieutenants that were in charge of platoons that, everyone with the greatest intentions, but these lieutenants often would come straight from the states out of boot camp in the basic school and expected uh, to lead a platoon of men in combat. Even the company commanders, in this case, J.D. Murray, who was a lieutenant, was the company commander, had combat experience. Many of these officers didn't have combat experience because they were rotated out. So that, along with the malfunction of the M16, that along with coming home and having tomatoes thrown at you and spit on you, the
Yeah.
Vietnam veterans had a lot to deal with, and that's why it's so important now that we really give them the honor that they deserve because they went to fight for our freedom and for our country.
And there was no flight simulator, so to speak, where they could go in and feel the pressure and, like they do with pilots and stuff. There's,
No, and in World War II, for example, a Marine company would be trained together in the States, more training, hopefully, when they were overseas with the same lieutenants and captain. So they were a unit, they were cohesive. In
ah,
Vietnam,
and that didn't happen in Vietnam.
they were not allowed the opportunity because of the various duties to train together. As I indicated, Lieutenant Murray didn't even know his three lieutenants who were his platoon commanders under him. So this was just one of so many challenges that these men had to face. Another challenge when combat happened and a piece of terrain was taken in Vietnam, usually the men had to come off of that piece of terrain. Well, the Vietnamese would just simply take it back. So often Marines and Army soldiers would find themselves fighting over the same terrain
Yeah.
once, twice,
Kind of
three
like
times.
you got it. Now, what do you do with it?
Well, they would take casualties every time. And in World War II, what would happen is that men would take a piece of terrain and keep it. We would conquer an island. Our soldiers in France would conquer that part of France and move forward and keep it. In Vietnam, we had this situation of men being killed to take a hill, coming off the hill, and then a month later or so, ordered to go back and take it again because the enemy had retaken it when they'd withdrawn. A lot of challenges, a lot that needs to be understood, mistakes that were made that we never need to make again. We've already, in many ways, the individual replacement system, for example, no longer exists. So that's one improvement. But it's a story, it's a tragic story, it's a heroic story. It is an awe-inspiring story of these men who are with us today. And you and I, this Christmas season, thank a Vietnam veteran. Thank them. Buy this book. Here's the story, and let's honor them.
So, do you uh, do you see this book in a sense as sort of a playbook of what not to do that could help uh, future military? I don't know that much about the military, but I'm thinking the people who are going through basic training, the people who are going through uh, ROTC training, or what how and things like that in what's the military school in Washington?
Oh, sure. Oh,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
West Point, of course, up in New
West
York.
Point, exactly.
Mm.
Do you see your book as a valuable tool for those people going forward in their military education?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that shifts us a bit into the marketing aspect of writing a memoir. And certainly you've addressed your reasons, your strong emotional reasons for writing this book. And now the question is, how do we get this book into the hands of the people who will find it most valuable and get the most out of it? And that's marketing. So do you have a plan for that?
Absolutely. So the week of December the 16th through the 21st,
Mm-hmm.
which is the week before Christmas, this is when I would encourage everyone to buy a copy of the book. You can find it directly from my website, doyleglass.com. You can also purchase it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and also check your local bookstore, available in paperback, ebook, and audio. But
Okay,
that's
I can put a link when I post this interview on YouTube. I can put a link below in the comments where people to Amazon, which is where most
absolutely.
people
And
go.
if people buy directly from my website, I
Yes.
will then
Okay.
provide to them what's called a book plate, which is simply a sticker that I sign and can also give a message to a veteran in the buyer's family. So it would make an incredible birthday gift, or I'm sorry, Christmas gift, for holiday gift for anyone looking to honor a veteran that they know or in their family. And December 16th and the 21st is the time we've set aside to really market this, to get the word out in a significant way.
Have you identified any other holidays, or you mentioned birthdays, but any other times of the year where it might be appropriate for you, for your book, to do a similar promotion to what you're doing now for Christmas?
Possibly. We've talked about possibly doing that for Memorial Day or
Oh,
Veterans
perfect.
Day.
Yes.
And that will
And
be
4th of July
4th of July, right? Exactly.
and Veterans Day.
Exactly. So we don't have any plans yet because we want to see how the marketing goes for
Right.
this week before
It is
Christmas.
ongoing.
It's ongoing, but to your point, Carolyn, when you are marketing, you have to choose times to really go for it and get the word out in a strong way. And we're doing that, and that's one reason that that we're talking now.
And you're working with a PR company to do this, right?
PR company, and then my own group of marketing folks that help with my website, that help with social media. As in the digital world that we live today,
Yeah.
we have to kind of own all of these different media outlets to get a message like this out.
Right. And for people who are just getting ready to publish their memoir, and did you have a budget going in for things like cover design, PR, advertising, anything like that? Did you have any thoughts at all to how much money you thought you might need to spend or plan to spend?
I don't have a specific number in front of me. I would have to go back and look specifically
No,
at
no,
my.
I'm not asking you for a specific number because every situation is going to be different. I just
Sure.
wanted to know if this is something you thought about and how you felt about spending money to promote your book.
Yes, you definitely have to set aside money for the marketing effort, and in some ways it can't be cheap. Obviously, doing some things, having a website, a Facebook page, it can be a great way to do it that's less expensive.
Mhm.
For me, it's almost just a labor of love in a sense to spend the money to get this story out to really all Americans and all freedom loving people in the world for men. And I would love to write about women too, the nurses in Vietnam, the doctors who, in an unpopular war, fought for our freedom, and we need to acknowledge and honor them.
Yes, a very early book I read after the war was called American. I found it at the library. It was called American Daughter Gone to War. And I can't remember the name of the author, but she was a nurse and she had gone to Vietnam straight out of nursing school, which she had gone into right out of high school. So she was young and her stories are amazing. And one of the things that happened to her was she came back and there was no emotional support, no reentry program, no nothing. They just dropped you back in the streets of America. Even the Peace Corps has a reentry program. But there was nothing for her, and she nearly committed suicide.
Right.
And the thing that saved her life was she was passing a newsstand on the street in San Francisco and saw some little headline on the news in the newspaper about some kind of emotional or mental health support for veterans. And she didn't know anything about it. And she bought that newspaper and saved her life.
Wow.
So that's the only book I'm even aware of that talks about the woman's experience.
And that's, Carolyn, that's just an incredible point. Even in Swift Sword, we have the account of Sergeant Larry Peters, who earned the Medal of Honor on the day that I'm writing about, September 4th, 1967. Well, he was killed in the battle. His sister joined the Marines right after he did and became
Yes,
a.
I remember you mentioning her.
Right. She became a nurse on an aircraft carrier, providing the needed support. I'm sorry, hospital ship, providing that need. And these nurses and doctors saved so many lives. One of the good things about Vietnam is when trauma and these wounds occurred, we were able to chopper the men out and get them to a hospital ship. And before that, the Navy corpsmen that took care of them, we were able to save many lives, and the nurses and doctors did that. But Larry Peters' sister was on an aircraft carrier and received word that her brother had been killed
Right.
while serving our country as a nurse. So the waves of gratitude that we should give these people, I'm just hoping that we can, as part of the mental health aspect that you were talking about, a thank you goes a long way to that.
Could you see yourself writing another book along the same line and doing these interviews, maybe starting with her and talking about the doctors and nurses and the service they gave?
Absolutely. Of course, we all have that thing called time, and what do we do with our time?
Oh,
So
yeah,
I have
that four-letter
other,
word.
yeah, and both of these books that I wrote took a number of years. The gathering of the interviews and then compiling them and going through them. So it's a very time heavy undertaking, but absolutely. At some point that might happen. It might not because I'm also working on other books, but I like to think that at the end, all of my work goes to honor those who fought for my freedom.
Well, I encourage you to move that one up the list.
Okay, absolutely, absolutely.
Do you have any specific advice that you would give to somebody who, let's say, they're writing any memoir, but a military memoir in particular? Do you have any any insight that you would want to share with them?
Absolutely. Number one would be get the firsthand account, if possible. If someone's alive, living, there in the experience. If it's a personal memoir, even go back and interview your high school teacher or college or whoever, important people in your life, and get that firsthand personal recollection, record it, get it transcribed, and save it, and start compiling firsthand data before those sources are no longer available. I said at least half of the men that I interviewed for these two books are no longer with us, so their firsthand stories are gone. And then, second to that, once you've exhausted that firsthand interview source, then start going to secondary sources for people that have done other research. Once again, if it's your personal memoir, of course, take down your own recollections and ferret out what are the most salient and important points that you're wanting to do. What's your purpose for doing it? So that
Did
those would
you,
be.
when you started, excuse me, when you started this, did you look at other Vietnam memoirs that were on the market? Did you see what else was out there first, or and if you did that in any way influence your decision to write this story?
I did, and what I saw was not encouraging because there wasn't much out there. The one book that I can currently think of, We Were Soldiers, which was made into a movie, was a very strong firsthand account of Vietnam in particular. There were others, but there's not a lot on the Vietnam War. That's one of the reasons that I said, okay, we have a gap in the record. I need to fill it. What I did do was look at World War II, where we have a whole lot more material. And when I started Swift Sword, now Lieutenant Colonel J.D. Murray, who was a lieutenant in charge of Mike Company at the time of the battle, told me that you meaning me, need to write this like the book With the Old Breed. With the Old Breed is a firsthand memoir from a Marine in World War II named E.B. Sledge, who fought at Peleliu and Okinawa. It is a very hard read. It's very real. It's graphic. It takes away all glory of war. It's real. The HBO miniseries The Pacific is based in part on Sledge's memoir. So Lieutenant Murray told me Swift Sword needs to be the With the Old Breed for the Vietnam generation. And that was kind of my charge, was to make it like that. Now, Sledge was a veteran who was there. This was his memoir. I've never served in the military. What I could do was simply give voice to those who did fight this battle. And that, I think I accomplished that.
I think you did too. I think you did really well. Uh, so before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think I've said everything. I will say this, that this is the second edition of this book. After the first edition was published in I believe 2014, I went back and looked at it and saw that it wasn't finished. I was lucky to have all of those firsthand accounts that I spoke about.
Mhm.
And in the second edition, you'll see in italics the quotes from the men themselves. And that's the change I wanted to make, to have them tell their stories. So I think this is as real as it can get for Vietnam. December 16th to the 21st, I encourage everyone to buy the book then. There it is. And those are Marines in Vietnam on choppers similar to those from on September 4th. And say thank you to all the veterans, not just Vietnam, but all the veterans that you know or in your life. You buy it as a gift and say thank you for our freedom.
Great. Again, it's called Swift Sword by Doyle Glass. That's Glass with two S's. And I put the I'll put the link in the video below. Thank you, Doyle, for your time. And I think that our viewers are really going to come away from this interview with you with some new ideas about sharing their personal experiences.
Thank you, Carolyn. It sure has been an honor to be here, and happy holidays to you and all of your viewers.
You too. Thank you.